Hi everybody, how are you? It is a few minutes after 10:30 a.m. EST Wednesday morning here in the Ultimate Baby Sleep Group. I apologize, I'm a few minutes late. Trying to figure out a few things over here. I finally figured out why this little camera thing of mine freezes a lot when we're doing lives. I thought my kids had been playing with it. If you've been watching the past few weeks, every week there's a technical problem. Well, I figured it out. It was actually really silly. Just this little tripod thing that I keep it in just kept hitting the off switch. Sometimes we overcomplicate situations. Okay, so this week, if you are new to the Ultimate Baby Sleep Group, every Monday there is a question thread where we post a certain theme. Last week was a little bit more open. We talked about sleep routines, a little bit more of an open forum, but typically we try to keep it very specific to a certain theme so I can talk in depth about that theme and idea, and you can hopefully learn about it and get some sleep help. So we post that on Mondays, and every Wednesday I come in and I answer your questions. So this week's question was actually supposed to be last week's question. Between my traveling, I went to Texas, and then there's crazy windstorms here in Michigan. My kids didn't have school because they didn't have power, and I was really rushed, so I didn't get to answer your question. So we're doing it afterwards. But this week's question is your questions about daylight savings time, the clock change. Now, I know usually it's better to address these things beforehand, so you're prepared, but happens to be this is the easy clock change with sleep, with child sleep. Not for adult sleep. I don't know about you guys, but I got out of bed at 7:30 feeling like it was 6:30 this morning. I am having a really hard time adjusting to the clock change, but for kids under about 6 or 7 years old, this clock change is the easy one. So for those of you, oh, hi Jamie, I'm glad you're here too. So if we have time at the end, this is going to be actually a pretty quick question answer thread. So Jamie, we can talk about whatever sleep questions you have also after I answer your question here, okay? And for those of you who are new, like I said, it's a question thread Mondays, and this week is the clock change. So I'm just going to go through the questions and answer you. But before I start, I want to tell you why this clock change is the easy one. There's 2 times a year we change the clock, right? We fall backwards. A few months ago, we changed the clocks an hour earlier, and here we spring forward, even though it doesn't feel like spring looking out my window covered in snow. We change the clock forward. Now, the next clock change, which we'll do, around, I think it's October, September, around that time, I am going to do a very detailed video here. I have one actually on my YouTube channel if you want to check it out, but that's the hard one. That's when I get tons of emails, tons of questions. People are all thwarted off because your babies that are waking up at 5 a.m. are now waking up at 4 a.m. And even though they're going to bed around the same time, they're overtired, naps get all off, babies wake up a lot. That's the difficult one that you usually have to do a good week and a half, sometimes 2 weeks of prep work before the clock change. This one, I wasn't as worried that I didn't have a chance to come in and talk to you about it because even babies that are not adaptable, babies that are super sensitive sleepers have a really hard time adjusting to new environments. This is the easy clock change. And why is that? Because even though we're shifting everything an hour earlier, your babies are probably going to bed still more or less around the same time. Usually they end up going to bed maybe 20 minutes later, maybe a half an hour later, but they fall into groove really, really quickly. So we're going to talk about the questions, but like I said, we'll probably have some time at the end to answer everyone else. Okay, so Liat, is it normal for babies to resist bedtime because it's more light out, right? Now we've changed the clocks. Your baby's going to bed at the new time, 7:30, but really it's 6:30, and it's not dark out yet. So is it normal for my baby to resist bedtime because it's more light out? Z was going to sleep so calmly until daylight savings when he started resisting bedtime like crazy. So Liat, I know your baby, and we know he is a very sensitive, non-adaptable sleeper. So he's not affected necessarily by the timing of his internal clock as much as he's obviously affected by it being light out when he's going to sleep. So what I want you to do is do your best to make the room as dark as possible till his body adjusts. First of all, it's not going to be this light out forever. There's a reason we change the clocks because it eventually does start getting darker earlier as kind of the day, light, moon, sunlight cycle starts to change. But do your best to set up a sleep environment as best as you can. If you know he was going to sleep beautifully when it was dark out and now suddenly there's a little bit of light streaming in at bedtime at 7:30, my goodness, make the room dark. Go out and get some room darkening shades. So I'm tripping up over here today. Go out and get some room darkening shades. Do what you can to help set up a sleep environment. And if you don't want to spend tons of money, you don't have to. Guess what an awesome trick is? And Liat, I think we've talked about this before, aluminum foil. Not as a long-term solution. You just tape some aluminum foil up on your window and it blocks light amazingly. Okay, so try that out. And if you know he was sleeping beautifully before the time change, then just set yourself up to be technically successful. Okay? Ashley, I owe you an apology because last week I told you I was going to be doing this video last week. So you, my dear, have a long question and let's go to it. Your daughter has been going to bed at 7, falling asleep anywhere between 7 and 7:30, and waking up 6:15 to 7:30. So she's typically getting around 11 hours of sleep. Fine. So with summer coming, we were hoping to get her to bed at 7:30, making bedtime later. So you adjusted yesterday and today for bedtime to be at 7 and in bed by 7:30, which is actually 30 minutes earlier than she used to be doing. So far, so good. Is this what we're supposed to do? So if we had done this video last week, like we were supposed to, what I would have told you to do is when we make the clocks later, your baby's 7 o'clock bedtime is suddenly changed to 8 o'clock bedtime, right? Because it's an hour later, so on the new time, it's 8 o'clock, but your baby's body is still going to sleep at their internal 7 o'clock. So if you don't want to suddenly jump your baby's bedtime to be an hour later, which a lot of you could still be suffering from now, every few nights, every 3-4 nights, incrementally make bedtime a little bit later, okay? A little bit later. So if your baby's going to bed now at the new, okay, let me not get complicated here. I don't want to confuse you with the times, and I'm confusing myself. If your baby went to bed at 7 p.m. before the time change, now your baby's going to bed at 8 p.m., still your baby's 7 p.m. So if you want to shift that, now that we're after the time change, irrelevant what we would have done last week, what I want you to do is every few nights, every 3-4 nights, incrementally shift bedtime to be a little later by 10 or 15 minutes. So Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, bump it to 7:10, 7:15. Saturday night, Sunday night, Monday night, bump it to 7:30. Every few nights. So it takes about a week and a half to get your baby adjusted to the new 8 o'clock, or excuse me, to the new 7 o'clock, which really is your baby's 8 o'clock. Doesn't matter what you want to call it. You got to get your baby ready to do that, because otherwise your baby's going to start waking up earlier and you're going to have kind of a regression there. So yes, Ashley, you did the right thing. In essence, making bedtime a little bit later, but I wouldn't necessarily jump to doing it a half an hour later. I would try to do it by 10, 15-minute intervals. Okay, now what's the second part of your question? Also, she's been napping usually an hour and a half to 2 hours, but maybe 3 days a week she wakes up after 45 minutes really upset and needs to be reset, meaning my husband and I go in the room and sit next to her and she goes back to sleep for another 45 minutes. If we don't go in and reset her, she seems to get too awake to go back down, and it isn't every day, but it's cumbersome and frustrating when it happens. So this is not a daylight savings time question. This is a napping question. But now, Ashley, if you've watched all the other videos and you know what's happening, what's going on here? Baby is waking up after completing a sleep cycle, 45 minutes. This reset is, in essence, helping baby transition back to the next sleep cycle. So I'm curious, Ashley, how your baby's falling asleep for those naps. If she's falling asleep independently, it's very possible, actually, by you going in and helping reset her, that you're actually waking her up. If she falls asleep on her own, without any aid, the likelihood is she's going to be able to transition back to sleep. And a lot of parents get nervous. They're actually, my baby's going to wake up. They're only going to take a 45-minute nap. I have to go do this reset. I have to go sit with her. But in essence, you might be actually disrupting her sleep more than you know by going in. So number one, if she's falling asleep on her own, give her a little bit of ample time to transition back to sleep without your help. If she's not falling asleep on her own and she's falling asleep being held, being rocked with a bottle with that, then start working on teaching her to fall asleep on her own for the nap, so she can transition back to sleep on her own for the nap. Okay? Not a daylight savings question, but I wanted to answer you. Okay. Jamie, and you are here now, and I see you posted a question, so I'm going to look at it after I read what your question is here. I'm so exhausted. All right, I remember reading this, telling you that this is hard. Okay. I think I really need to reach out. Okay, as soon as I think she's catching on to the routine or schedule I've been starting around 7:15 consistently, things get changed and daylight savings time happens. So she'll sleep about a half an hour and then wake up at 8:30 or 9 and then won't go back to sleep for hours. And when she does, it's only when I'm nursing her. I'm trying not to have so much comfort nursing. My husband can't even help because she only wants me. She was so good about going down half asleep and soothing, and now it's all messed up again, and I bet you mean because of daylight savings time. I'm writing in tears and I'm sleep deprived. Sorry so long. First of all, it's okay, and we're all here for you and we want to support you, and I'm so sorry how hard this is for you, Jamie. You wrote, so to piggyback on my original question, I've tried to wean the amount of time she's nursing. Hang on. So I think it's comfort nursing, but she's eating. She only wants me. Last night she even was awake and let me put her down around 8:15 p.m. and she hugged her glowworm and let me rub her back and fell asleep, but always wakes up at 10 and then again around 11:30, 12, then again around 3. I try to let her cry just a little or just comfort her, but she screams and cries until I pick her up to nurse her. At the 3 a.m. feeding, my husband has been laying with her horizontally at the end of the bed, and she goes to sleep, and then he brings her into the pack and play. I don't like it, but I'm so tired, and he tried to help. This is for after you answer everyone's questions. Sorry, I just have a chance to right now. Okay, that's fine. If anyone else watching has daylight savings time questions, otherwise I'm going to get into Jamie's question here. Daylight savings time, in essence, it's about either doing the prep work, but this time of year, like I said, is the absolute easy one. So if your baby is still suffering and your baby is having a really hard time staying awake till regular bedtime, don't jump the gun to try to make bedtime an hour later because 7 o'clock is the new 8 o'clock, right? Just try to incrementally make bedtime a little bit later every few nights so your baby can now adjust to the new time. Or if you feel like bedtime is happening and your baby wants to go to bed a little earlier, do the reverse and have bedtime offered a little bit earlier every few nights or so to get that in gear and set that up, okay? I hope that makes sense to you. Ask your questions below if it doesn't, and then I'll try to clarify for you. So Jamie, a few things. Number one, and I tell this to my clients I work with all the time, the only consistent thing you can ever rely on in motherhood with children is that things are always changing, okay? You might set up awesome sleep habits and then your baby learns to climb out of the crib. You might set up awesome sleep habits and then your baby gets sick. You might have another baby. You might travel. You might be daylight savings time. All these things are constantly happening that can throw your sleep off. The question is how to set it up in such a way so whenever these little minor changes happen, because they're always happening, you don't get too thrown off. It sounds like you didn't have a baseline to start with, and when you don't have a really set, solid sleep in place, then yeah, everything's going to throw you off because it's not really holding on to anything strong. The goal is to get that baseline set up in a solid way. So there's a lot of different things going on, but that's why every little change affects your sleep, Jamie, because daylight savings time happens and you're thrown off. This happens and you're thrown off. She's teething, that happens. Regression, because you're not held down by a strong, consistent sleep baseline. So that's the most important thing to work on is her sleep. And it sounds like you've tried. If you are concerned that there is real avid hunger, don't just try to skip it. Go back, watch hang on. I can't always see all the questions here. I see you asked a question, Ryan. Sorry, I interrupted myself. I'm going to answer you in a minute. Go back and watch the night feedings one because you can't just skip a feeding. If she's hungry at 8, 10, 11, 12, and 3, try to get it down by doing that by either lessening the actual amount she's eating. Oh, you said she's nursing? So if she's nursing 2 sides, nurse 1 side. If she's nursing for 20 minutes, try to nurse her for 15 minutes. Lessen the actual amount because you can't really measure with nursing, number 1. Number 2, space it out. If she's waking up at 8, 10, 12, and 3, feed her at 8:30, 10:30, 12:30, 3:30, then 9, 11, 1, and 4, and slowly space it out so you get down from 3, down to 2, down to 1, and doing all these things. Now she's gonna cry. She might be angry. Our goal in parenting, whether it's a 6-month-old, a 6-year-old, or a 16-year-old, our goal in parenting is not that our kids should never cry, right? And I know so many people don't want to let their babies cry, and I'm not saying cry it out. I'm saying crying in frustration or protesting. If my 5-year-old, and this totally happened to me last night, my 5-year-old didn't like the dinner I made, and he was angry and saying, "Mommy, you never like the food I like, and I want this." I don't even know. I think he might have even asked for ice cream for dinner. No, you're not getting ice cream. And I sat down on the floor with him, and I said, "Listen, I'm so sorry. I love you so much. This is what Mommy made for dinner. You usually like it. If you want, I'll make you my backup, which is cornflakes, because I don't make 500 dinners for every kid. You can have some cornflakes, or you can have this dinner, but I'm sorry. We're not having ice cream. We're not having cookies. We're not having this." Is he going through emotional damage or trauma? No, he's just not getting what he wants, so he's crying. And that's okay. There's a very, very big difference between a child crying because they're, not being responded to, God forbid. They're alone. They're by themselves. They're this. Or a child crying because they're not being responded to in the way they want. So, Jamie, when you're patting her back and you're doing these different things, I know it's hard to listen to her cry, but the goal is to teach her how to do this with your help, with your aid. The goal in all of our parenting, whether it's babies or older children, is just to teach our children that we're supportive, we're there for them, we love them, but that they have to get to that place of independence. So at the end of the day, Jamie, if you just pick her up after an hour of trying something or an hour and a half, assuming she's not hungry and you're spacing things out properly, you're in essence just reinforcing her crying and saying, well, when you cry really hard, then you get picked up. Or when you this, and I'm sorry to be so spicy about this, but I want you to see results. Anything you do is not going to work unless you have a game plan and you stick with it, okay? And Jamie, I know we talked about checking out that 7-day trial in my Rested Moms Club. You should definitely check it out because it goes through this whole system and you have an actual plan to stick with. But anything you do, whether you work with my methods, you try another method, you read a book, you create your own method, whatever, nothing is going to work if you don't do it full force. And it doesn't mean full force, scream it out. No, I don't advocate ever leaving babies to cry it out. And that's why I started my whole methods. That's what all the families who work with me and contact me do not want to leave their babies to cry it out. And that's why I started this group. But sometimes there is crying involved when your child is protesting or angry or upset. But your child can be crying there while you stroke their head, love them, sing to them, kiss them, cuddle them. Okay. I'll put the link so you can check that out. I'm sorry for that pep talk, Jamie. I can hear it in your voice. And I talked to someone yesterday who was interested in hiring me for my one-on-one services, okay? And she was telling me, listen, I haven't worked on my baby's sleep because it just hurts me to let my baby cry. Even when I'm holding her and she cries, I don't want any crying. And I told her, I understand that, but I'm not here to lie. I'm not going to tell someone, yes, hire me and I promise there'll be no crying, because there is some crying. We are uprooting an entire life of habits here and replacing them with new ones. But like I said, crying when you're there with them. Crying, but, okay, I'm angry, but I'm not traumatized. Crying, but mommy's here for me, mommy's responding to me. That's what's important, okay? So this mother, whatever, and they emailed me this morning. They said they're not going to do it because it's too hard. She doesn't want to have any crying. You know what? Fine. She also doesn't want to have any sleep, because if you want to make changes, you got to do something about it. And like I said, Jamie, I will post the link above for Rested Moms Club so you can check out that 7-day trial. Ryan, hi, my dear. How are you? How do you adjust? Oh, and Ryan, we're going to be doing our live Q&A this week in Rested Moms Club, so you can ask. But how do you adjust the later morning wake up if your baby's going to sleep the same time at night? It's throwing off my nap schedule. Awesome daylight savings time question. Okay, so I think, and I don't have your schedule in front of me, Ryan, because I know we talked about this in detail last week. Ryan, remind me, I'm going to answer another question. Write down what time your baby is going to bed and what time your baby is waking up. So just to generally answer that till you post that. So let's say your baby's going to bed at 7 p.m. and it's throwing off your mornings and your nap schedule. So with this specifically, just like I talk about in Rested Moms Club, Ryan, you have to actively take the reins to have the routine happen. So if you've made bedtime a little bit later and you're adjusting that, and you're adjusting the wake up time, you have to also adjust the mornings. It's just not in compartments. We can't compartmentalize sleep. We can't only work on bedtime or only work on naps or only work on the mornings, because as you know, it's a 24-hour cycle. Day affects, night affects, naps affects, mornings affects, everything. So if you're resetting bedtime, you have to also reset the mornings. So let's say for me, for example, right? I usually get up at 6 a.m. before my kids wake up in the morning, and I like to exercise. I like to go for a run every morning at 6 a.m. or now with the snow in my basement on my treadmill. The past few mornings, I've not been able to do it because it's 5 a.m., okay? Because even though it's 6 a.m. on the clock, my body still thinks it's 5 a.m. And even this morning, I had to pull myself out of bed at 7:30 to get my kids ready for school. So your baby waking up at 7 a.m., it's technically 12 hours later, is your baby 6 a.m. But you know what? You got to do it. So if it's too hard to just rip the Band-Aid off and make everything an hour earlier, do the opposite of what I just told you in the nights, Ryan. Instead of waking your baby up at, 7 a.m., and your baby's waking up at 8 a.m., wake your baby up at 7:45 for a few days, then to 7:30, then to 7:15, then closer to 7 to get the adjustment happening. Because yes, if you have inconsistent erratic mornings, you're going to have inconsistent erratic naps. And daylight savings can throw us off. Remember, this is the easy one of the two, like I said, but if you want to have things set up well, do it gradually. Some babies are really adaptable. You can just do it all the way like we do for adults, even though we're not necessarily adaptable. It's just easier because we can push ourselves. But if your baby's having a hard time adjusting to the new time with the mornings, then do it incrementally. But the goal is it shouldn't take longer than 4, 5, 6 days, because you have set naps in gear. You have good solid night sleep that you're working on. Make sure you can do your best to get that up. Let's see what you all wrote. Okay, Ryan, 6:30 p.m., bedtime, 7:30 wake up. Used to be 6 a.m. wake up. Okay, so number one, you can either leave it if it doesn't bother you, right? What do I always say? If it's not broken, don't fix it. So if it's not a problem, fine. But if you see the 6:30 a.m. wake up is super throwing things off, so tomorrow morning, Ryan, wake your baby up at 6:20, 6:15. Do that for Thursday morning, Friday morning. Then over the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, bump it to 6:15, 6:10, and then a few more days, so it'll be closer to 6 o'clock if you find that doing it drastically too much will be, difficult for your baby to adjust. Jamie, I know you don't like cry it out. I will try to be strong. I appreciate it and need to. I'd rather you be spicy and honest. Just be afraid she's actually in pain or something. Yeah, you can always count on me to be spicy, Jamie. I'll always tell you what I think. And yeah, if a baby, obviously you're not going to try anything, whether it's daylight savings, sleep training, all the questions you all ask in this group, you're not going to enlist any new methods when your baby is sick. When your baby is in that die-hard place of teething or pain or has a fever or just got shots or you're traveling across the world. Of course not, right? You can't enlist change when you're in transition, just like none of us can go on a diet when we're staying at our mom's house. It's just not going to happen. You have to have stability. In order to have stability, then you can work on things and grow. So, Jamie, if your baby's teething or has a fever or sick, obviously that's not the time to start it. The question is, once you've been doing it for a while, or night 3 or night 4 or night 5, and then you get concerned, and then it's a different issue. I want you to know it doesn't suddenly happen between 6:59 when your baby's fine and 7 p.m. when you put your baby in the crib. Within that 1 minute window, your baby's in excruciating pain or suddenly bumped up to a raging fever of 106. God forbid, that's like really high. But I'm saying, you know what I mean? So you have to understand that there's a very fine line. Obviously, our role as parents is to make sure that our kids are always healthy. And when they're sick, they get TLC. And I'm never, ever, ever going to advocate a baby with a fever to sleep train or to stick them in their crib. But you have to use your better judgment and know that our babies are smart. And sometimes they might be taking you for a ride. And when your baby cries, that's how she's protesting and telling you that she doesn't want to sleep, okay? Let's see. Okay, Ryan, do I have to adjust daytime sleep if I leave the 7:30 wake up? Yes, because you want to keep the sleep windows, Ryan, and I know you know what I'm talking about because you've watched the courses and you're in there. If the 7:30 wake up is fine and you don't mind the timing, you're going to have to readjust the naps accordingly with the new sleep window, right? You can't just keep nap number 1 at 8:30 just for the sake of it being at 8:30. If your baby's now waking up at 7:30 and you've got the 2-hour window that you're working on, then you're going to have to bump the nap to closer to 9:15, 9:30. So just adjust accordingly based on the windows. And then once the windows are consistent and the mornings become consistent, that's when you get that flow of the really awesome routine happening. I have him down to 4 to 4.5 hour daytime sleep. Adjust it down to 3 to 3.5 hours. Sleeps an extra hour. I wouldn't say to mess with it. I would just work on the timing. I would say to just make everything later then, Ryan, okay? I understand what you're asking because I always talk about sleep being a 24-hour cycle and getting the quota and this amount of sleep within 24 hours and this amount during the day. But if he's doing so well, I really don't want you to mess with a good thing. So I prefer either one of two things, okay? Either one, you wake him up earlier and do that idea of waking him up at 7 to 6:30 to 6 back to your normal old routine, or sticking with the new wake up and just having everything be later, including bedtime. But I don't want you to start minimizing nap time because that's going to cause everything to go kind of off kilter when you've done so well at setting it up. Okay, so I went on my whole rampage here on Jamie. I hope it's okay, but I want you all to know that because obviously I feel very strongly about this and that's why I do what I do. Anyone else have any questions? I'm trying to look in down here. Nope, that is it. Anyone else who has any questions about daylight savings time, or if you're having issues with pulling your teenage babies out of bed and they can't wake up, it's one of two options like I just told Ryan. Either get back to the old routine and slowly, gradually wake your baby up a little earlier and have everything back to how it was. Or you could decide to just go with the new time and have everything later. But don't start messing with the timing of naps. Don't start messing with the duration of naps. Don't start doing all those things because if you have something set up well, don't break a good thing. If things are in a bad place, fine. Maybe you can have a little bit of room for flexibility to try to rearrange it, but stick with the baseline that you know works. Jamie, don't be sorry. It's something I always want to tell everyone else is that sometimes you have to just take the reins and do things, and it's a good thing for everyone here to hear because you're all here because you want sleep. Most of you aren't here just because it sounds fun to look at everyone's sleep problems or watch my videos maybe, but you're all here because you want sleep. And I'm never here to force anyone or tell anyone you have to do this, you have to do that. This is about building a supportive community that we have here. No judgments, none of us saying gung-ho, cry it out's horrible, this, none of that. Everyone has to decide what's right for them, what's right for their family. There's a lot of different ways to get sleep. Obviously, I created this group because I don't love cry it out, but if you're gung-ho, cry it out and it works, go for it, okay? It's all about what works for you. But anything you do is only going to work if you're stick with it. Nothing's going to work if you randomly try it. And as the parents of your children, only you can decide what works. So Jamie, I'm going to post the link. Anyone else who's interested, I've been talking about this the past few weeks because we're just starting to pump it up over there. It's getting really exciting, is the Rested Moms Club, which is my entire sleep courses for every age, 0 to 5 months, 6 to 12 months, 1 to 2 years, toddlers. We have a group like this that we are getting pumping. We have a few people here in the Rested Moms Club who are watching. We're starting to get very exciting things happening. We're going to be starting to do these lives, by the way, everyone, every week also to help you all. And it's really amazing. It's the same step-by-step system I literally use with all of the families I work with, whether it's my one-on-one families or my sleep groups, all of my higher end services. It's the exact same system I put into slideshows, into courses, into interactive documents, but you get the whole benefit of the community here. And we're running a free 7-day trial now. We ran it last week. We're running it still for a while that you can sign up and check out the Rested Moms Club for free. And guess what? If you don't like it, just cancel, okay? After that, if after a week you like it, you'll stick with us and start becoming a member monthly. But check it out. I'll post the link so you can check it out, Jamie, and you can sign up and join us over there. And Jamie